Anna stood at the bus stop, clutching David's hand so tightly that he could feel the nervous tremor in her palm. The countryside air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves, and the distant outline of rolling hills made the world look calmer than Anna's racing thoughts. She glanced at David, who stood tall but uneasy, his brown hair falling into his eyes as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "You'll be fine," Anna whispered, forcing a smile. "She's strict sometimes, but she's kind. Once she knows you, she'll like you." David exhaled and gave a half smile. "I'm not worried about her liking me. I'm worried about making the wrong impression. What if she thinks I'm not good enough for you?" "She won't," Anna replied firmly. "Grandma Mary raised me. She knows I wouldn't bring someone I don't trust." The bus rumbled into view, old and squeaky, carrying them deeper into the countryside. David had been to Anna's hometown before, but never to the house that mattered most, the little wooden cottage where her grandmother lived alone, surrounded by apple trees and quiet fields. The ride was silent for a while. Anna kept her eyes on the fields passing by, remembering summers spent barefoot in her grandmother's garden, winters with hot tea and stories by the fireplace. Mary was not just a grandmother, she was a fortress of wisdom and discipline. When Anna's parents had divorced, it was Mary who stepped in to guide her. Now, Anna was bringing David, the boy who had become more than just a boyfriend. He was her first love, the one who listened to her late-night thoughts, the one who walked with her through city streets as if the world belonged to them. Introducing him to Grandma Mary meant sealing his place in her life. When they arrived at the small bus station near the village, David helped Anna with her bag. The gravel crunched under their shoes as they walked down the narrow road. The house appeared in the distance, a two-story wooden home with white shutters and smoke curling from the chimney. "Here we are," Anna said, her heart pounding. Mary stood at the doorway, her figure framed by the evening light. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and she wore a long dark skirt with a knitted shawl. Even from afar, David could feel the authority in her presence. "Grandma?" Anna called, waving. Mary's face softened with a smile as she opened her arms. Anna rushed to hug her, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender and flower. "And this must be David," Mary said, her eyes narrowing slightly as she examined him. "Yes, Grandma, this is him." David extended his hand, his voice steady but respectful. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Harris." "Mary will do," she said, shaking his hand firmly. Her grip surprised him, strong, almost unyielding, as though she measured his character through the pressure of his palm. Inside, the house smelled of apple pie, cinnamon, and dried herbs. The walls were decorated with old photographed sepia images of family members from decades past, portraits of children, and faded wedding pictures. David paused for a moment, staring at the history on the walls, feeling as if every picture was watching him. "Sit down, both of you," Mary instructed. "Dinner is ready. I hope you're hungry." They sat around the wooden table, where a steaming pie sat next, 2 bowls of roasted potatoes and fresh bread. David tried to relax, but he could feel Mary's eyes on him as he helped himself to the food. "So, David," Mary began, her tone casual yet sharp. "Tell me about your family." David swallowed, then set his fork down politely. "Well, my mother's name is Olivia. She raised me on her own. My father left when I was very young, I hardly remember him." "And your grandparents?" Mary asked, her gaze suddenly intense. "My grandmother, her name is Mary too. Mary Carter. She lives in the countryside as well, though we don't see each other very often. My mom takes care of her when she can. She's getting old." Anna smiled, ready to change the subject, but froze when she saw her grandmother's face. Mary Harris had gone pale, her lips tightening as if she'd heard something that rattled her bones. "That's interesting," Mary said quietly, staring down at her plate. She quickly covered it with a faint smile. "Eat, eat. You'll need your strength." David looked confused but obeyed, while Anna tried to read her grandmother's expression. Something about the way she had reacted to David's words sent a chill down her spine. The evening went on with polite conversation. David spoke about university, his part-time job at the bookstore, his love of literature. Mary listened, asking sharp but fair questions. Yet, in her eyes, there was a shadow that neither Anna nor David could quite name. When dinner was over, Mary excused herself to fetch tea. Anna leaned toward David. "See? She likes you," Anna whispered. David chuckled nervously. "I don't know, she looked like she'd seen a ghost when I mentioned my grandmother." Anna frowned. "You're imagining things. Grandma just worries a lot. She's fine." But deep inside, Anna felt the same unease. When Mary returned, carrying a teapot and delicate china cups, her hands trembled ever so slightly. She poured the tea carefully, as though afraid of spilling secrets into the cups. David took a sip and smiled. "This is really good." Mary's eyes softened, but only for a second. "Tea always reveals more than words, David. You can learn a lot about someone by the way they drink it." Anna laughed nervously. "Grandma, don't scare him." But David didn't laugh. He met Mary's gaze and saw something strange: recognition, perhaps, or a hidden memory. He looked away quickly, his heart beating faster than he wanted Anna to notice. Outside, the night deepened and the house seemed to breathe with silence. Mary sat quietly, her mind elsewhere, while Anna tried to keep the conversation alive. For the first time, David wondered if meeting Grandma Mary had opened a door to something much bigger than he understood. And Mary, sitting in her chair with her teacup trembling in her hands, whispered silently to herself, "It can't be, it simply can't be." Anna cleared the plates while David stood to help. But Mary waved him back to his chair with a small, imperious gesture that somehow remained kind. "Guests don't wash dishes on the first night," she said. "It would make the house think we've lost our manners." She rose with quiet efficiency, collecting bowls and cutlery, moving like someone who had done this so many times the task itself had become muscle memory. The kitchen light cast a honeyed glow over the walls, catching on the glass jars of dried herbs, thyme, mint, chamomile labeled in neat handwriting. "I can at least dry," David offered. Mary hesitated. "You may hand me the towels," she conceded, and he smiled at the small victory, shifting to stand at the edge of the sink like a junior apprentice. Anna watched them, amused and strangely moved. There was something disarming about seeing the two people she loved standing side by side, bound together by ordinary domesticity: water running, plates stacking, steam fogging the window over the sink. Outside, crickets stitched a steady rhythm into the night. The moon rose, pale and formal, as if wearing gloves. "Where did you grow up, David?" Mary asked, her tone light but edged with purpose. "In the city," he said, passing her a towel. "Mom moved around a bit when I was little, though, for work. We ended up not too far from here when I started high school." "And your grandmother," Mary said, not glancing at him. "You said she lives in the countryside." "Yes." His voice softened. "Mom tries to visit her on Sundays. I go when I can. Grandma, she gets confused sometimes. She doesn't always remember me." Mary stilled, a plate suspended halfway to the rack. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," David said quickly, and then realized he was lying. It wasn't okay. "She calls me by someone else's name sometimes. Evan, or something like that. Mom says it's just the way memories tangle." Mary resumed stacking. "Memories do tangle," she murmured, "especially when the threads were never tied properly in the first place." Anna came up behind David and slid her arms around his waist, her cheek against his back. "You're doing great," she whispered, half joking, half serious. He squeezed her hand, grateful for the anchor. When the last dish was set to dry, Mary wiped the counter with slow, precise circles. "The guest room is ready," she said. "Anna, you'll take the small room. David can sleep in the study. There's a proper bed in there. I insist." "Grandma," Mary raised an eyebrow. "You can what?" "Take the rooms you said," Anna finished, and they traded the kind of smile that had grown out of years of respectful skirmishes. They carried their bags down the narrow hallway. The floorboards murmured underfoot, each plank an old confidant. On the walls, more photographs: a girl with a gap-toothed grin holding a slate, a young man in a military jacket, his eyes determined, his smile hesitant, a woman in a patterned dress, standing beside a bicycle with wicker baskets. Anna had walked this hall thousands of times and loved these images as a child without understanding that photographs are cages where moments are trapped forever, and sometimes the trapped things rattle the bars at night. David paused at one frame, a small, oval portrait with faded edges. A little girl with serious eyes, hair clipped back with two barrettes. There was no caption. "Who's this?" he asked. Mary, who had followed them to make sure they didn't mix up the rooms, peered at the picture without moving closer, as if distance were a kind of protection. "Family," she said. "We were full of it once." David waited for more, but the hallway held its breath, and Mary turned to the subject by opening the study door. "There's a blanket in the bottom drawer. The window sticks lift as you slide it. The lamp is temperamental but loyal." "Thank you," David said. "I mean it. Your home is its beautiful." Mary's expression softened in spite of herself. "A house isn't beautiful," she said. "It's simply obedient to the hands that tend it. Good night." She left them with the hush that follows a benediction. Anna stepped into her room, set down her bag, and turned to find David in the doorway of the study, his shoulders a silhouette against the room's dark. They shared a look that said both were really here and am glad it's you next to me while we are. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. Your grandma is intense." "Understatement," Anna said, smiling. Then the smile faded. "She seemed weird when you mentioned your grandmother's name." David leaned against the doorframe. "Mary Carter," he said, quietly. It made her go quiet. Anna shrugged. "Could be coincidence. Mary's a common name. Maybe?" He ran a hand through his hair. "It felt like more than that." "She does that," Anna said. "Feels like more." She crossed the hall to kiss him, quick and earnest. "Well, be fine." After lights out, the house shifted into its nighttime body. The stairs stiffened, the pipes sighed, the old clock in the living room cleared its throat before ticking toward midnight. Anna lay awake, watching the shape of the window turn from rectangle to ghost to nothing. Sleep came slowly, then all at once, like a curtain drawn so fast it startled her. David slept lightly, as if camping in a familiar but not entirely safe forest. He dreamed of books opening to reveal photographs instead of pages. He dreamed of apple pie and distant voices saying the wrong names. He woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, soft and deliberate. For a moment he thought it was Anna, but the rhythm was older, a practiced pattern. Even, pause, even, pause. The steps stopped outside the study. The doorknob trembled as if deciding whether to turn. It didn't. After a minute, the steps went on, retreating to the kitchen, where a kettle began to murmur. He sat up. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper, a study's scent, crisp and thoughtful. On the desk stood a brass lamp with a shade the color of tea, and beside it, stacks of old notebooks with ribbons for bookmarks. He shouldn't snoop, and he wouldn't, but his eyes still drifted over the spines, recipes 19,791,985, planting log, rent receipts, letters not sent. That last title tugged at him like a sleeve, and he looked away. Morning found him dressed and in the kitchen before Anna, conscience appeased by coffee. Mary was already at the table, rolling dough with the serenity of a ritual. "Good morning," he said. She looked up, reading his face. "You didn't sleep." "Some," he said. "Coffee is in the pot. Milk in the fridge. Sugar is for the weak." He grinned. "So I've heard." Anna drifted in, hair pulled into a crooked bun, wearing an oversized sweater that had once been her father's. She kissed Mary's cheek, then David's. "What can I do?" "You can eat," Mary said. "Food refuses to cook for anxious people." Anna made a face. "That can't be true." Mary raised a brow. "You think soup doesn't know when it's being hurried." After breakfast, they put on boots and followed Mary to the garden. The air had a bright, clean edge, and the earth was damp from last night's thin rain. Rows of vegetables ran like paragraphs in a well-written book. Apple trees bracketed the yard, their leaves whispering in a tongue David wanted to understand. "Pick the ripe ones," Mary said, handing Anna a woven basket. "They'll tell you if you listen." "How do apples talk?" David asked. "By being heavy," Mary said, "and by coming away easily when you ask." They laughed, but soon the rhythm of the task made conversation unnecessary. Apple after apple, the soft pluck and thud into the basket, the occasional leaf brushing David's face with a whisper like a secret told by someone shy. At the fence, a blackbird landed, cocked its head, and scolded them for taking what it had also counted on. Mary lifted a finger toward it as if negotiating a treaty. "Well, leave the high branches," she promised. The bird made a noise that could have been agreement or insult and flew off. David found a wind-fallen apple tucked under a tangle of grass and picked it up. A worm had sketched a wandering script over the skin. He turned it in his palm, thinking of old letters and wrong names. "Did your grandmother like apples?" Mary asked, cropping the question so casually that he nearly missed the tightness in it. "She did," he said. "She'd peel them in one long strip without breaking it. Mom would hold out her hand like a plate and catch the peel." Mary's mouth softened into something that wasn't quite a smile. "My mother used to do that." "Did she teach you?" Anna asked. "She taught me to keep the peels to feed the rabbits," Mary said. "No waste." She gestured to the trees. "Anna, the back shed, bring the old stool." "The red one." Anna jogged across the yard toward the shed. David glanced at Mary. She wasn't looking at him, but at the half-peeled apple in her palm, tracing the spiral as if it were a map. "You said your grandmother gets confused," she said. "Does she say things that your mother won't explain?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mostly names. Once she called me boy like she didn't want to be wrong. She asked for a music box that Mom says we don't have. And she sings a song sometimes. It's a lullaby, I think." "What song?" He hummed a few bars. It was simple, 3 notes rising and falling like breath. Mary's eyes flinched and the apple's peel broke. Anna returned with the stool, breath puffing in the cool air. "What did I miss?" "Your grandmother broke an apple peel," David said lightly, and Mary gave him a look of gratitude that didn't reach her eyes. They worked until noon. Back in the kitchen, with the smell of cinnamon and butter gathering like a small crowd, Mary sent David to fetch a tin from the top shelf of the pantry. He reached and felt along the 3rd shelf until his fingers found metal and dust. The tin rattled with an oddly formal sound, something between coins and buttons. He brought it to the table and set it down. "That one," Mary said. "Open it." Inside were small things that had decided to become precious by surviving. A brooch shaped like a swallow, a bus ticket faded nearly to pale gray, a strip of ribbon, a brass key with no door. He touched the key, it tingled with the ancient electricity of secrets. "What's this too?" he asked. Mary wiped flour from her hands and took the key between her fingers, feeling its weight like one might weigh the truth. "It used to open the old trunk in the attic," she said. "The lock is stiff now. It only opens when it wants to be remembered." Anna made a face. "Grandma, you make objects sound like they have mood swings, don't you?" Mary asked and slipped the key back into the tin. "People leave moods in the things they touch." While the pie baked, they drifted into the living room. The old clock took to the task of counting time with more dignity in daylight. Anna sank into the couch. David sat beside her. Mary took her chair by the window, a seat that looked less like furniture and more like a station, a place where arrivals and departures were recorded. She stared out at the garden, the apple trees disciplined and green. "Tell me something true," she said after a while, as if picking up a conversation they hadn't been having. "Both of you." Anna laughed softly. "I hate the sound of alarm clocks," she said. "I prefer to wake up when the light changes in the room." Mary inclined her head. "And you, David?" He thought. Truth was a shy animal. "When I was little," he said, "I wanted to be a cartographer. I wanted to put names on places so they wouldn't be lost." Mary's gaze sharpened. "Names are heavy things to place." "I know," he said. "I just thought if you name something, it can't disappear." Mary looked at him for a long time. If only that were true. After lunch, Anna convinced David to walk with her to the ridge behind the house where the hill rose into a copper-colored field. They climbed in companionable silence, the path edged with wild flowers that had decided to be brave this late in the year. From the top, the village lay below them, roofs like a handful of cards, the church spire a finger lifted to make a point. "I'm glad you're here," Anna said, taking his hand, "even if she interrogates you." "I like her," David said, surprising himself with the accuracy of it. She's terrifying but honest. She's built out of truth, Anna said. That's why she's heavy to hold. They sat in the grass. David watched a hawk stitch a circle in the sky, thread pulling taut against the blue. Anna, when I said the thing about my grandmother's name making her go quiet. Yeah, I didn't imagine it. He waited. I know you know. Anna exhaled. I know. She plucked a blade of grass and tied a knot in it. My dad used to say Grandma keeps the past like some people keep a garden tidy where the neighbors can see and wild as an animal where no one looks. Do you think it's about me? I think it's about all of us, she said. But maybe you're a match near dry grass. They returned before the sun confessed it was tired. In the kitchen, Mary had set out plates without fanfare. The pie stood on the counter, cooling like a planet. The house smelled so much like childhood that David felt briefly lost inside a memory he couldn't name. During dessert, Mary asked questions that moved like a chess player's knight to steps over one step down. Your mother, she works. Yes, David said, cutting a precise wedge. She's a nurse. Night shifts sometimes. And your father. Mary's eyes did not move from the pie. He swallowed. Gone. He left when I was 5. Mary's knife paused. Do you remember his name? David blinked. No. Mom never used it after he left. On forums, she put a dash. The world is made of dashes, Mary said. 1,000 little silences strung together. After dinner, Anna convinced David to help her find extra blankets in the attic. Mary handed them the brass key and her fingers brushed his as she passed it. The moment felt ceremonial, like receiving a relic with instructions to be reverent but not afraid. The attic stairs were narrow and steep, with a rope handrail that looked more symbolic than supportive. The attic itself was a soft cathedral of dust and timber, afternoon light sieving through the small window to catch in the air like glitter. Boxes were stacked in methodical rows, each labeled with Mary's hand. Winter clothes, tools, toys, books, photographs. Blankets, Anna said, pointing to a trunk near the window. There. David knelt and tried the lid. It didn't budge. He inserted the key. The lock grumbled like an old man roused for a trivial reason. He turned gently, then with more conviction. The lock sighed and let go. Inside, the blankets lay folded like obedient clouds. Anna pulled one up and pressed it to her cheek. Smells like cedar. David reached for another and felt something thin and stiff slip from between the layers. He caught it before it fell the corner of a photograph. Not wanting to be a thief of moments, he glanced at Anna. She nodded. It's okay. He eased it free. The picture had faded to a soft, stubborn palette to women standing in front of a fence. One was young, with hair and a bright ribbon, her smile a burst of certainty. The other was older, her hand on the younger woman's shoulder, her face turned slightly away from the camera as if listening to someone just out of frame. On the back, in Mary's neat, practical script, Olivia Summerfair. Anna's mouth parted. Olivia, she said. That's your mom's name. David stared at the younger woman's face. The nose, the chin, the shape of the smile, the sensations of recognition gathered like birds. It looks like her, he said, breath shallow. But younger. Anna flipped the photo and read the rest of the caption aloud. Olivia Summerfair, 1989. She glanced at him. David, he felt the floor shift, then realized it was not the floor but something inside him. Lots of people are named Olivia, he said, but he heard the falseness, tinny and cheap. They were still kneeling when the attic stairs creaked. Mary's head appeared, haloed by the square of stairwell light. Careful up here, she said, voice steady. Some boxes don't like being moved. Anna turned the photograph face down, suddenly protective of something she didn't understand. We found the blankets, she said, too quickly. Mary climbed the last step and crossed the attic with a surety that said she had known these boards in all their moods. She looked at the trunk, then at their faces. What else? David held out the photo. There was no hiding now. Mary took it without comment, and for a heartbeat or two, the world balanced on the fulcrum of her silence. Then she nodded, a small, private nod. Yes, she said. Olivia? Who is she? David asked, the words hoarse. Mary's mouth pressed into a line. "A girl I loved," she said. "A girl who loved me back. And now?" Anna asked. "And now," Mary said, placing the photograph back in the trunk with the blankets as if tucking a child into bed, "we will not ruin a good night by disturbing the ghosts. Come. It's cold." It was the kind of answer that shut a door gently but firmly. They followed her down, blankets in their arms, hearts loud enough that the clock almost seemed kind by comparison. Later, in the study, David folded the blanket over the foot of the bed and stared at the ceiling. The photo had wrapped itself around his ribs. He tried to imagine the girl in the ribbon at the summer fair, tried to place her in the landscape of his mother's stories, how she'd said they moved a lot, how she glossed over the early years with jokes and long shifts and fewer details than a son needs. His phone buzzed a text from Anna. "You okay?" "I don't know," he typed. "She knew my mom's name." A pause. Then, "I think she knows more than that." He set the phone face down. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard sighed, and then came a sound he recognized now not as creak but as footstep. He wondered if Mary slept at all, or if she simply rested between the duties of guarding the living and binding the past so it wouldn't fray. The night tilted. He drifted, then floated up toward wakefulness at the soft scrape of the front door. It wasn't the bold scrape of someone leaving, but the careful hush of someone letting in air without announcing it. He sat up, heart thumping. The clock said to 14. He padded to the hallway and stopped, listening. A murmur from the living room, Mary's voice, low and steady, as if speaking to someone who needed gentleness mixed with sternness. Another voice answered, a whisper that was not Anna's. He leaned closer, and the whisper turned into music. No, not music, a sound like a music box that couldn't quite find its melody. 3 notes, rising and falling. He closed his eyes. The lullaby, the one his grandmother hummed when she was lost inside her own house. He retreated, careful not to be the pebble that starts an avalanche, and lay awake until the thin gray edge of morning slid under the curtains. By breakfast, Mary had the world back in order. Oatmeal steamed, bread cooled, butter waited with the patience of saints. Anna stirred honey into her bowl as if it were a potion she could prescribe. David watched Mary and wondered how many truths a person could hold before their spine bent. I thought we'd go into town today, Mary said. The market has pears that try to be better than apples. It might do us good to be around people making ordinary purchases. Sounds nice, Anna said, her tone a little too bright. They walked the half-mile to town along a road that had learned not to complain about feet. The market was the good kind of chaotic voices, bargaining, baskets with fresh bread, tomatoes the color of punctuation marks. David tried to be present. He tasted a sliver of cheese, smiled at a dog pulling a child on a string, but his mind moved under the surface like something with its own agenda. At a stall selling old books, he paused, drawn by instinct and habit. The vendor, a woman with rings on every finger, smiled. "Looking for anything special?" "Maps," he said without thinking. "Or family histories." "Those are the same thing," she replied, and handed him a slim volume with cracked leather. He opened it and found a pressed flower flattened into elegant obedience between pages of a local history. He turned another page and stopped. A photograph had been tucked there, 3 women on a front step, skirts brushing their ankles. On the back, in pencil, Mary H., Olivia C., Ruth. His breath left him. "Find something," Anna asked, appearing at his elbow. He showed her the names. She went very still, like a deer deciding whether to run. "Mary H.," David said. "Harris." Anna swallowed. "Maybe?" He flipped the photo back over. The middle woman, Olivia, wore that same ribbon in her hair. The younger woman on the right was unfamiliar. The woman on the left, Mary H., was exactly the age of the woman now arranging pears in her basket to stalls over. "Grandma," Anna called before she could stop herself. Mary turned, and David slipped the photograph into the book as if hiding a bird he intended to set free later. The vendor raised a brow, amused. "You can keep that with the book," she said. "It's had a good long sleep." Mary reached them, her basket filled with pears and a dignity that didn't allow for haste. She glanced at the book in David's hands, then at the vendor, whom she greeted by name. The vendor gave her a conspiratorial smile. "Sold him one of your favorites." "Of course you did," Mary said, with the resignation of someone who had always suspected the past would sell her out in the town square one day. "Let's go home." They walked back under a sky the color of patience. The house received them the way old houses receive their people, with a small adjustment of shoulders, a settling. Mary set the pears on the counter and washed her hands for a long time, as if the market had left a cling she wished to be rid of. David placed the book on the table. He wasn't trying to be dramatic, but he also wasn't going to pretend the world hadn't tilted by a degree. Anna stood beside him, her shoulder touching his, a contact point reminding them both they were still electricity and skin. Mary dried her hands and looked at the book without touching it. "You found a photograph." "We did," Anna said, choosing we on purpose. Mary waited. David opened the book and slid the photo out, laying it on the wood like a card in a game where everyone understood the stakes. "Mary H.," he said. "Olivia C., Ruth." Mary did not flinch. She took the photo and held it in her palm, thumb brushing the edge with a tenderness that included rebuke. "Some days," she said softly, "the town is nothing but a long hallway full of doors that insist on opening." She lifted her eyes to David. "Do you remember the lullaby you hummed yesterday?" He nodded. "My mother sang it to me," Mary said. "I sang it to my daughter. And to my son." She set the photograph down, face up, as if introducing them. "And that is enough for today." Anna's breath hitched. David swallowed questions that wanted to be reckless. The clock cleared its throat again. The apples in the bowl looked round and well-behaved. Mary turned to the sink and filled the kettle. The familiar hiss rose, a domestic storm gathering with exquisite politeness. She reached up to the shelf above the mugs and paused, her hand hovering over a small wooden box. She took it down, cradling it. When she opened the lid, a tiny melody, 3 notes, rising and falling, shivered into the room and then failed, as if embarrassed to be heard. The music box was old, its paint worn to the tender wood beneath. Mary closed it and held it for a moment, eyes closed, not praying exactly, but doing something that felt adjacent. Then she put it back carefully and turned to them with a smile gentle enough to be mistaken for surrender. "Tea?" she asked. Neither Anna nor David moved. The room held the pause like breath. "Yes," David said finally, feeling the truth gathering but not yet placed, the map expanding under his feet. "Tea." And Mary, with the same steady hands that had rolled dough and held photographs and tucked secrets into trunks, poured water over leaves and watched as if something might rise to the surface that could be named, just not tonight. The morning sun spilled into the kitchen like golden syrup, warming the wooden floorboards and brightening the old curtains patterned with faded blue flowers. Anna sat at the table with a notebook open in front of her, sketching little doodles of apples and leaves while she waited for David to return from the garden. Grandma Mary was moving around the room with her usual quiet precision, brewing tea, slicing bread, and humming a tune that seemed older than the walls themselves. When David came in, carrying a basket of freshly picked pears, Mary glanced up from her work. "Not bad," she said. "You've got an eye for fruit. Most people bruise them before they even make it to the table." David smiled, setting the basket down carefully. "I guess books and fruit aren't so different. Both need to be handled gently, or they won't last." Mary's eyebrow lifted ever so slightly. "That's a fair point. Tell me, do you handle everything in life with such caution?" Anna rolled her eyes. "Grandma, don't interrogate him over pears." "In not interrogating," Mary said evenly, her voice calm but carrying weight. "I'm learning." They sat down together, the table crowded with pears, bread, and the morning light. Anna buttered her toast, trying to lighten the mood. "Grandma has a way of making breakfast feel like a court hearing," she joked. Mary chuckled softly, though her eyes didn't leave David. "You can tell a lot about someone when they're off guard. Over tea, for example, or during a meal. The little details show who we are." David nodded, not shrinking from her gaze. "I think that's true. My mother always said the same thing. She can tell what kind of day I had just by the way I stir my tea. And your mother's name was Olivia, yes? Mary asked, as if the question were casual. Yes, David replied, his tone respectful. Olivia Carter. She's a nurse now. She worked so hard to raise me on her own. Mary's hand froze briefly over her cup, but only unnoticed. The grandmother's face was calm again in an instant, yet her knuckles whitened against the porcelain. Anna tried to redirect. David, tell Grandma about the bookstore. He works there part-time. So David did. He spoke about the rows of dusty shelves, the smell of old paper, the satisfaction of helping a stranger find the perfect book. Mary listened intently, asking small questions here and there, but her thoughts seemed half elsewhere, as if an invisible thread tugged her toward memories she had long tried to bury. After breakfast, Mary insisted they join her in the garden. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of soil and apple blossoms. David rolled up his sleeves, eager to help. Anna knelt beside him, laughing as he tried to untangle a stubborn weed from between the carrots. Mary worked a few rows away, her movements precise and almost meditative. As she weeded, she began to speak not to them directly at first, but as if she were talking to the earth itself. When I was younger, she said, her voice carrying over the garden, life didn't give me much choice. I had to grow strong roots or be blown away by every storm. Anna smiled. Grandma's gardening philosophy again, she whispered to David. But David listened closely. What kind of storms? He asked. Mary glanced at him, her eyes unreadable. The kind that come with people leaving. The kind that come with secrets. The kind that force you to raise children alone, even when you never planned to. Anna looked up sharply. Mary rarely spoke about the past. She had always been private about her early life. Grandma, Anna said softly, you don't have to, but Mary continued. I had a daughter once. Olivia. Bright, stubborn, always asking questions? She had a laugh that could turn a winter day into spring. David's hands froze in the soil. He felt his heart beat in his throat. Mary noticed his expression and her lips tightened, but she went on. I was too young, too foolish. I married early, lost my husband early, and then raised Olivia as best I could. Later, life gave me another chance. Another husband, another child. That was Anna's father. Anna's eyes widened. She had never heard Grandma speak so directly about her first family. Wait, Grandma, you never told me that before. I didn't know. Mary sighed, brushing soil from her hands. Not every story is told in the daylight. Some are best left in the dark. David felt dizzy. His chest tightened as puzzle pieces began sliding into place in his mind. His mother's name, his grandmother's name, the lullaby, the old photographs. Could it be? Anna looked between them, sensing the sudden tension. David, are you okay? You look pale. I'm fine. He lied quickly. Just too much sun, maybe. But he wasn't fine. Every word Mary spoke felt like a key turning in a lock he didn't even know existed. He thought about the photograph in the attic labeled Olivia, Summer Fair. He thought about the lullaby his grandmother sang, the same tune Mary had recognized instantly. As the day wore on, they harvested vegetables, stacked wood, and drank lemonade on the porch. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary, but beneath the calm surface, David felt a storm gathering. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber and rose, Mary brought out an old wooden box. She placed it on the table without a word. Anna leaned forward. What's this? Mary opened the lid, revealing a collection of old photographs, letters, and small keepsakes, fragments of a life lived long ago. She pulled out one photograph and slid it across the table toward David. It was a picture of a young woman with familiar eyes standing in front of a fairground. The handwriting on the back read simply, Olivia, 1989. David's breath caught. His hands trembled as he turned the photo over. This looks like my mom, he whispered. Anna's eyes widened. David, that's your mom's name. Olivia Carter. Mary's face was pale but resolute. Yes, she said softly. That was my daughter. The room fell silent. The clock ticked in the corner like a heartbeat. Anna's stomach churned and David felt the ground shift beneath him. Are you saying? David's voice cracked. Are you saying my mother is your daughter? Mary closed the box gently. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Yes, David. Olivia is my child. Which means you are my grandson." Anna gasped. The truth struck her like a physical blow. Her boyfriend her love was not just a stranger brought into her family. He was family. Mary bowed her head, her hands clasped tightly together. "I never imagined this day would come. Life has a cruel way of bringing back the past when you least expect it." David's breath was shallow, his thoughts racing. He looked at Anna, then back at Mary. "That means Anna," and Mary nodded grimly. "You are both my grandchildren. From different children, but still blood binds you both to me." The silence that followed was unbearable. Anna felt tears sting her eyes. David's face was pale, almost ghostly. The world they knew had just collapsed, and nothing would ever be the same again. No one moved at first. The words hung between them like a bell still ringing, "You are my grandson." The kitchen's lamplight turned soft around the edges as if the room itself were blinking back tears. The clock on the wall kept time with an almost indecent confidence, ticking as though it had just witnessed the rearrangement of a family. Anna's chair scraped the floor. She stood without knowing why, then sat again, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Grandma," she said, and the word trembled. "Are you sure? Not just a resemblance, not a coincidence?" Mary did not answer immediately. She opened the wooden box again and removed a second photograph, smaller, more battered. It showed a hospital room in the colorless way of old film, a young woman with tired eyes and a newborn swaddled against her chest. The young woman's smile had a strange balance of fear and ferocity. On the back, in that same practical script, "Olivia, Street, Agnes Maternity Ward." Mary placed a folded paper beside it. "A copy," she said. "The original is locked away. Birth records, dates, signatures." She tapped a name near the bottom. "Mother, Mary Harris, guardian. When Olivia was young, it was complicated. I signed to many lines when she could not. I kept to many things when she would not." David leaned in as if approaching a fire. The dates matched what he knew. The hospital was one his mother had mentioned only once, in a tone that made it sound like a city she wished she'd never visited. He looked at Mary and found no triumph in her face, only the fatigue of a truth carried too far and too long. "My mother never told me," he said. The words were not an accusation so much as a report. She never said your name." "I know," Mary said. "She took my name off things when she could. She had her reasons." She looked at Anna, then at David. "Those reasons are hers to tell, if she wants. I stand by this. I am the woman who held her when she cried and who watched her leave when staying became a wound." Anna pressed a palm to her mouth. She was trying to breathe calmly and failing. "So David is," she couldn't say "my cousin." The syllables felt like shards. Mary reached across the table and turned the music box toward her as though the room needed a ritual to hold it together. She opened the lid and the 3 notes rose, fell, and faltered. "Blood is simple on paper," she said. "In life, it's a maze." David stared at the little mechanism. "My grandmother on my mother's side, she hums that. The same melody. My mother sang it to me," Mary murmured. "I sang it to Olivia and later to your father." Her mouth bent, not quite a smile, not quite a wound. "Family's echo. We don't always recognize the sound." Anna stood again, this time on purpose, and went to the sink. She turned the tap, then turned it off, then stood with her hands braced on the counter as if steadying a ship. "What do we do now?" she asked, not turning around. No one answered. The question was not built for answers. It was a place to stand and look in both directions. David pulled his chair back and sank into it, palms open on his knees as though waiting to receive a verdict. He thought about the first day he met Anna in the bookstore, all labeled maps and atlases, how she'd laughed when he told her he used to want to be a cartographer. "You'd be good at it," she'd said. "You're careful with names?" He had not known then that the most dangerous names were the ones pressed into the people you loved. Mary gathered the papers and placed them back in the box with a care that was almost apology. "I should have seen sooner," she said. "When you walked through the door, I kept telling myself it was coincidence. That there are many Davids and many Marys and more Olivias than the world knows what to do with. But the face, she touched her own cheek as if to point to where memory lives. You carry your mother like a watermark. Why didn't you say it last night? Anna asked. You knew, or half knew. Why wait? Because a wrong truth can break a life as quickly as a right one, Mary said. Because I have learned the mercy of a night's sleep, even if it is thin as paper. David folded forward, elbows on the table, head in his hands. The gesture was a shelter. The room smelled like pears and old wood and the faint metal breath of the music box. He remembered every small kindness Anna had shown him, every plan they'd made, and he felt those plans unspool like thread dissolved by water. I love her, he said quietly, to the wood grain, to his own unprepared courage. I love Anna. The words lifted and hung over the table, useless and true. Anna turned from the sink as if waking. I love you too, she said, and then she was already shaking her head as if the sentence could be edited after it had been spoken. I mean, I did. I do. She stopped. A person can drown in present tense. Mary's shoulders lowered by a fraction, the way a hillside lowers after the rain settles. I know, she said. You are good children. You've done nothing wrong except not know what you could not possibly know. Silence began to creep along the edges of the room again, and Mary would not allow it. She rose, went to the cabinet, and brought down a small tin. Inside, not photographs this time, but letters. Some sealed, some torn open with the impatience of years. She placed them on the table. Olivia wrote when she left, she said. Not often, not enough, but enough for me to keep up a little with the weather of her life. She slid a letter toward David. He did not open it. The envelope felt heavy in a moral way. I can't, he said. It's not mine. It is now, Mary said gently, but you need not read today. Anna took a seat again. She felt like someone who had been running and stopped and discovered the ground was glass. Tell me, she said to Mary, and her voice surprised all of them with how steady it was. Please, tell us how it was. Not everything, but enough that it isn't a hole we have to keep skirting. Mary looked toward the window as if the trees could lend her language. Then she began, not grandly, but as one speaks when finally permitted to say a thing without flinching. I married at 19, she said. It was a farm boy's steadiness I thought I needed. He died before we had a chance to get bored of each other. I learned very quickly that grief is an excellent chef. It will feed you until you cannot move. She stacked memories like plates. Olivia came bright and loud, a firecracker in church shoes. She was angry at the world by 12, angry at small towns and small talk, at the way people remembered your business longer than you did. When she told me she was leaving at 17, I told her to put on a coat. That is the most honest thing I can say about my mothering. A smile ghosted across her mouth. She wrote, sometimes. Years later, she stumbled home, belly first. You were that belly, David. She was not ready, she was ferocious. We argued the way people argue when they are terrified in opposite directions. After you were born, she stayed for a while. Then one day she gathered you and a bag of clothes and left a note where the teapot would find it. Mary drew a line on the table with her finger. I didn't chase her. I was tired of running. And then life gave me your father, Anna. A second chance at ordinary. I took it like medicine. Anna listened with her hands tucked under her thighs to keep them from trembling. Why didn't you tell me about Olivia? She asked, not accusing, only placing a question at the center of the table with the letters and photographs and the pears. Because I wanted something in this house to be simple, Mary said. Because I thought the past had agreed to keep to its side of the yard. She shook her head. But the past has no gates. David looked up. My mother, she told me her grandmother had died. The sentence felt childish as soon as he said it. Mary's eyes softened. I don't blame her for choosing language that made room to breathe. She folded her hands. I'm not interested in blame. I'm interested in the fact that you are kind and brave and sitting in my kitchen on a day you thought would be ordinary. Anna made a small sound that might have been a laugh if it had grown better. She reached for David's hand, then stopped halfway, as if there were a new gravity between them. He saw her stop and felt the motion like a mirror. They were already learning the choreography of a new life, and it hurt. "What now?" David asked. It was the second time the question had been asked, and its weight had doubled. Mary's gaze did not waver. "Now we let the truth finish arriving," she said. "We do not outrun it. We name things properly." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had that quiet conviction that had always told Anna when a rule was being made. "And you do not go on as you were." Anna's breath went thin. The words were expected and still arrived like a door closing. David nodded as if someone had placed a heavy book in his lap. "I know," he said. He had known the moment the photograph slid across the wood. Mary turned her ring around her finger, a habit of thinking. "I am not your judge, children, but I am your grandmother. To both of you, I will not bless a thing that will harm you." And this, she opened her hands to include the table, the letters, the music box, the whole house. "This will harm you if you try to make it behave like it is ordinary." Anna's eyes filled, overflowed, and she did not hide it. David's throat worked around a hurt that had no tidy name. The room, having done all it could to hold, sagged with them. After a while, Mary rose and busied herself with the kettle again, as if tea could be brewed thick enough to pour over the day and solidify it into something passable. Steam climbed. Cups were placed. Honey was offered. Small mercies are the only ones that fit in a human hand. "Should I call my mother?" David asked, staring into his cup. Mary set her spoon down. "Not yet," she said. "Not from inside the first storm. Wait until you can ask her questions without making her a wall to throw them at." She touched his shoulder. "She is my child. She is also your mother. Both things are true and will be truer if you let time make some space around them." They drank in silence. The tea burned a path and then left warmth behind. When the cups were empty, Mary collected them. The gestures of washing, rinsing, drying sounded exaggerated, like the house was trying to reassert its identity. "We do dishes here, we live here, we breathe and sleep and wake." By evening, the light had turned to the color that makes people forgive each other. They didn't forgive anything, but they sat in it anyway. On the porch, Anna and David watched swallows draw letters no one could read. The distance between them was small and vast, like the distance between stars that look side by side. "I don't know how to be with you," Anna whispered. "I don't either," David said. He tried a smile and failed. "I only know I can't unknow you." She swallowed. "Well, have to learn a different word." He nodded. "We will?" Behind them, Mary stood at the doorway in her shawl, a quiet sentinel between what had been and what would insist on being. She looked like every mother and every grandmother and every old photograph, fierce, tired, unwilling to surrender her people to loneliness if sheer presence could be armor. The first cricket called up the evening. Somewhere in the house, the music box gave a tiny sound as if memory, on its own, had turned the key a fraction. No melody followed, only the small, honest admission of a mechanism that still existed. When darkness folded the yard, Mary lit the lamp, and the three of them returned to the kitchen because humans have always gathered in light when night presses its face against the glass. They didn't say much. A chair scraped. A spoon tapped. The clock cleared its throat and went back to its work. They would call Olivia. They would make a list of dates. They would find where the stories overlapped and where they had been torn. They would decide how to speak to one another tomorrow and the next day and then all the days after when grief had sat down and taken off its shoes. But not tonight. Tonight the revelation had arrived, sat at the table, and emptied its pockets. Tonight they learned the first lesson of maps. Every true line changes the shape of all the others. And in the hush that came after, they let the new country settle around their hearts, uncharted and difficult, but real enough to require a name. The house was quiet the next morning, but it was not the gentle quiet of dawn. It was a weighted silence, thick as a wool blanket pulled over every room. The air itself seemed to hesitate, as if afraid to move. David woke early, lying on the study bed with the blanket twisted around his legs, and stared at the ceiling. He could still hear the words from the night before echoing in his chest, reshaping him each time he replayed them. "You are my grandson." The truth was simple, and yet it burned. He rose slowly, moving through the house as though each floorboard might accuse him. In the kitchen, he found Mary already there, standing at the sink with her back to him. She was washing a single teacup, over and over, as if scrubbing the porcelain might also scrub her memory. "Good morning," he said quietly. Mary did not turn. "Did you sleep?" "Not really." "Nor did I." She set the cup aside. The night has a way of replaying what you wish would rest. David wanted to ask her 1,000 questions about Olivia, about the lost years, about why no one had told him sooner, but the words stayed locked in his throat. He poured himself water, drank, and sat at the table. Anna entered moments later, wrapped in a sweater to sizes too big, her hair messy and her eyes rimmed red from crying. She looked at David and then away, as though staring too long might reopen a wound they had only just bandaged shut. "Morning," she whispered. He nodded. The three of them sat around the table, each waiting for the others to say something that would make the world less strange. But the words would not come. Finally, Mary spoke. "Children," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled, "last night changed everything. But it also changed nothing. You are still who you were. You are kind. You are good. What has shifted is only the names we give to one another." Anna's throat tightened. "Names matter." "Grandma?" "Yes," Mary admitted. "They do. And sometimes they matter too much." Silence fell again. Later that day, Anna asked David to walk with her. They left the house and climbed the ridge behind the garden, the same hill they had visited only yesterday before their world had been rearranged. The grass whispered beneath their feet, and the sky stretched wide and merciless above them. When they reached the top, Anna sat down, hugging her knees to her chest. David sat beside her, close enough to feel her warmth but not daring to touch. "I don't know how to do this," Anna said, her voice breaking. "Yesterday you were my everything. Today you're my—" She stopped. The word cousin lodged in her throat like a stone. "I know," David said. He picked at the grass, tearing blades into thin strips. "I don't want to lose you, but we can't go back." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "Do you think we would have figured it out if Grandma hadn't said anything? Or would we have kept going until it was too late?" "Too late for what?" David asked, though he already knew. "Too late to stop loving you," Anna whispered. David's chest ached. "We're already too late?" They sat in silence, letting the truth settle like cold rain. Back at the house, Mary watched them from the window. She recognized the way they leaned toward each other even as they tried to stay apart. It reminded her of her own youth, of stolen glances, forbidden touches, the sweetness and cruelty of desire when the world said no. She remembered her first husband, Thomas, the boy with calloused hands who had promised her forever but only managed 5 years before a tractor accident took him. She remembered Olivia's birth, the long nights alone, the judgment of neighbors. She remembered remarriage, a second chance, and the constant ache of unfinished stories. Her heart twisted. She had always wanted to protect her grandchildren from the mistakes of her past, but now she had dragged them straight into the labyrinth she thought she had sealed off. That evening, Anna and David sat on the porch together. The crickets had begun their nightly song, and the moon rose like a slow confession. "Do you hate me now?" Anna asked suddenly. David turned, startled. "Of course not. Why would I?" "Because everything between us was wrong, and I didn't know." "Neither of us knew," he said. "We loved with the information we had. That doesn't make it wrong, it makes it tragic." She swallowed hard. "So, what happens now?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe we stop being Anna and David the couple, and try to be Anna and David the family. Somehow?" She let out a shaky laugh. "That sounds impossible. Most things worth surviving are." Mary joined them on the porch then, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She looked at their faces, pale in the moonlight, and felt the weight of generations pressing on her. "When I was your age," she said softly, "I thought love was enough. I thought it could conquer everything: poverty, grief, shame. But I learned that love alone can't change the world's rules. It can only make the breaking of them hurt more." Anna leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "What do we do?" "Grandma." Mary sighed. "You grieve. You let go, and then you go on." The next few days passed in slow, aching rhythm. They cooked meals together but barely spoke. They worked in the garden, each movement deliberate, as if digging might ground them again. At night, David lay awake in the study, staring at the ceiling, while Anna cried quietly into her pillow across the hall. Mary carried her own burden, wandering the house at night, her footsteps soft but steady. Sometimes she paused outside their doors, whispering prayers into the dark. She wished she could carry the pain for them, but pain was not transferable. Each heart must bleed in its own way. One afternoon, David found her in the attic, sitting beside the old trunk with the key in her lap. She was holding another photograph, this one of herself as a young woman, smiling beside Thomas, her first husband. "You loved him," David said quietly. "Yes," Mary replied, "with the kind of love you only feel once. He was my beginning." "And Olivia's father?" David asked. Mary's eyes clouded. "He was a good man who didn't stay. Some people are not built for forever." David sat beside her. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" She turned the photograph over in her hands. "Regret is a heavy suitcase, David. You can't carry it forever. I've learned to set it down when I can. But yes, I regret letting silence grow between me and Olivia. That silence is why you stand here today not knowing who I was to you." David swallowed. "I'm angry at her for not telling me. And I'm angry at you for not telling me sooner. But mostly I'm just lost." Mary placed her hand on his. "Anger is honest. Lost is honest. Stay with those truths until gentler ones arrive." That night, the three of them sat by the fireplace. Anna stared into the flames, David read quietly from a book without turning the pages, and Mary knitted without looking at her work. The silence was no longer empty, but full of grief, of love, of the complicated knots that tied them all together. Finally, Anna spoke. "We'll be okay, won't we?" Mary set down her knitting. "Yes," she said firmly. "Not the same, never the same, but okay." David closed the book and looked at Anna. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the ache of what they had lost was unbearable. But then he nodded, as if sealing a promise they would survive this. Outside, the wind moved through the apple trees, carrying whispers of old songs and old names. Inside, 3 generations sat together, bound not by choice but by truth. And truth, Mary thought as she watched them, is both the cruelest and the kindest gift a family can give. On the morning they decided to make the calls, the light came in clean and decorated, as if the sky had taken a deep breath and started over. Dew clung to the grass in a grammar of commas. The house had learned their new quiet, the kind that wasn't an absence so much as a truce, and held it the way a palm holds water. Mary set the kettle on. She wrapped her shawl tight, then loosened it again, undecided between warmth and ceremony. Anna sat at the table with her elbows squared, a soldier's posture disguising a ruinous knight. David stood near the window, fingers on the latch, as if part of him were ready to open the pane and climb out into the older, simpler air of yesterday. "Well, speak to your mother first," Mary said, not looking at either of them. "Then, if you like, we'll walk." David nodded. His throat was crowded with the versions of himself that wouldn't survive the day. He took his phone from his pocket, placed it face up on the table, then turned it over and left it there, a black stone. "She's probably between shifts," he murmured. "But she'll answer." "Let's make room for her too," Mary said. She poured tea and set cups on saucers as if arranging witnesses. David stepped into the study to call. The door remained ajar, an old house's refusal to allow total privacy. Anna sat very still, listening not with her ears but with the part of her that had learned the contour of David's silences. Mary faced the window and watched a cloud try on several shapes before settling for nothing. "Mom." David's voice, careful. A pause. "Yeah. I'm at a friend's grandma's place, out near the orchards." Another pause. "Then I found a photograph." Silence traveled down the hall like weather. In the kitchen, Anna pressed her palm to her cup, heat anchored her. Mary's mouth tightened into the kind of line a seamstress makes when fabric puckers and can't be smoothed without taking the whole thing apart. "A photograph of you," David said, "and the word you carried 15 kinds of ache. With a woman named Mary. Mom, she's here." The house took that sentence in, bent, and didn't break. There was a long murmur of a reply, soft, rushed, the sound of someone stepping out of a hospital hallway to hide in a stairwell where secrets can echo without consequence. David said no more for a while. He listened. The listening was an act of love and also the first discipline of adulthood, to let someone else's story occupy the room. Anna imagined Olivia's hand braced against a white painted wall, imagined the vertical line of a fluorescent light, imagined the old, precise grief of a daughter whose mother had not been dead after all, just shelved under an alias called later. David's voice again lower, coaxing. No, I didn't know. A swallow? I'm not angry that you didn't tell me. I'm angry at how it hurts, which is not your fault. Another quiet, yes. She wants to talk to you when you're ready. He returned with his phone pressed flat against his chest. The skin around his eyes looked thin, like the first ice on the rain barrel. He sat, then stood, then sat again. She said she always meant to bring me here, he reported. But every year that she didn't made the next year heavier. She said that by the time it felt possible, it felt unforgivable. He breathed. She asked if I could forgive her anyway. And Mary asked. I told her I could forgive the past if she'll let me carry the future with her, he said, surprising himself with the sentence and finding it true. Mary's hands, which had been so obedient all her life, disobeyed and reached for him. He let them? She squeezed, once, the way you prime a pump. Olivia was born stubborn, she said softly. It takes stubbornness to come home through a door you left yourself. She's finishing her shift at 5, David said. She'll call back. She wants to speak to you then? He looked at Anna. She asked about you. Anna tried to smile, failed, and settled for a nod. Tell her I'm on her side, even when sides don't make sense. They ate without tasting. They tried to open the music box. 3 notes rose, fell, and then, courageously, a 4th tried to follow and failed. Mary shut it gently. Perhaps tomorrow. After washing up, Mary took a pair of scissors from the drawer and stepped into the garden. She cut rosemary, thyme, and a fistful of mint. Well, walk to the ridge, she said, tying the herbs with kitchen twine. People think walking helps the mind. It doesn't. It helps the body carry the mind. They went single file along the narrow path. The herb bundle swung from Mary's hand, ticking the air with scent. On a watch between them, her gaze on the place where the path was worn to dirt by simpler days. David watched the apple trees and catalogued their loyalty to sun and season, the way their faithfulness owed nothing to sentiment and everything to practice. On the ridge, the wind practiced its old argument with the grasses. The village lay tidy at their feet, like a truth told with good manners. From this distance, roofs touched without colliding. Roads met and parted without sorrow. I used to bring your mother here when she was small, Mary said, to the horizon. She'd throw a stick and insist the wind would bring it back if she loved hard enough. When it didn't, she loved harder. Then she learned to keep her sticks. She smiled, unkind to herself. I taught her that. Grandma, Anna said, you taught us to survive. And to be tender with the tools, David added, surprising her and making her look at him with a name he hadn't yet earned and already had, grandson. They stood without speaking for the time it takes a hawk to draw a full circle. Then Anna reached for David's hand. He didn't take it. He lifted his own and rested it near hers, a near touch, a map of restraint. She nodded, grateful for the geometry of mercy. Will we ever not want what we can have? She asked. Wanting is a climate, Mary said. You don't dismiss it, you prepare for it. She pressed the herb bundle into Anna's palm. Smell this when you think the air has forgotten you. They returned below, and afternoon unspooled into the work people do when they need to be near without talking. Shells were cracked, beans were snapped, a drawer was organized with authoritarian kindness. A loose hinge was brought to heel. At 4:58, the phone on the table warmed with the promise of ringing. At 5, it did. Mary answered. Olivia? A name and a breath, both older than the device that carried them. The conversation began at the edge of voice and moved inward, carefully, like 2 swimmers entering cold water. Anna stepped onto the porch to give them room. David followed, stopping at the doorframe the way you stop at a border and read the posted rules. From inside, the cadences, apology braided with defense, memory bumping its shin on a fact, to people taking turns pulling the other back from the brink of saying the thing that would salt the earth. And, surprisingly soon, laughter frightened, wobbly, and enormous, the kind that can make room for a new piece of furniture in a crowded house. When the call ended, Mary didn't move for a few heartbeats. Then she placed the phone on the table as if returning a book to the correct shelf. "She's coming Sunday," she said. She asked what to bring. I told her. Nothing but her hands. She turned to David. "She asked to speak to you." He took the phone back to the study. The house, a veteran of privacy wars, looked away. Anna sat on the porch step and watched a pair of children in the lane attempt to share a Red Bull argument. Treaty, relapse, treaty. A dog adjudicated with cheerful bias. Anna. Mary had stepped into the doorway behind her. "Come walk with me to the churchyard." Anna rose, and they went side by side across a map Mary knew by calf and ankle. In the churchyard, the stones were neither humble nor proud, they were stones. Mary stopped before a modest marker. Thomas Harris, 19,611,984. She smoothed the top with her palm, a gesture past habit and into devotion. "I brought your father here after he broke his first plate," Mary said. "I told him the dead forgive clumsiness. Then I told him I didn't." She smiled at the memory's crooked mouth. "I was wrong." Anna took her hand. "Grandma?" "When Olivia left, I told Thomas Stone more than I told any living person," Mary said. "That's not piety, that's cowardice with good posture." She inhaled. "I won't do it again. I will tell the living the thing they need to hear, and I will count the cost, and I will pay it." Anna nodded. "You already are." They stood a minute more, and in that minute the bell in the church tower made a small sound. It was not time to ring, it simply wanted to. They walked back slowly. The lane had turned gold at the edges. David waited on the porch with the look of someone who had been crying without spectacle. "She asked if she could talk to you, Anna," he said. "Not now. Sunday. She wanted me to tell you that she's grateful you exist." Anna laughed, a small, astonished bark. "That's the first time anyone has thanked me for existing." "Get used to it," Mary said. "You're very good at it." They ate supper early. The pears tried to be better than apples and nearly succeeded. Afterward, they did not hurry through dishes. The slowness felt like a tribute to a day that had not demanded speed. When the stars came, they came all at once, as if the lid had been taken off a dark jar. Mary brought the music box to the porch. She wound it carefully, as if asking a question of a reluctant witness. 3 notes rose, 4, and then trembling, defiant, a 5th found its footing. The melody, still halting, made it to the turn where memory repeats itself and started again, less afraid. "Look at her," Anna whispered, meaning not the box but the woman holding it. Mary's face had softened into something wide enough to include both relief and mourning without putting them in separate rooms. "Maps," David said, out of nowhere. Mary glanced over. "Yes. I used to think you named a place to keep it from disappearing," he said. "Today I learned you also rename yourself to keep from disappearing in the place." He took a breath that seemed to lengthen his spine. "I'm not just someone who lost something today. I'm someone who gained a grandmother and found a mother's missing door." Anna looked at him with the particular pride reserved for people you love who have managed something you couldn't teach them. "And I gained a cousin," she said, and made herself try the word in her mouth until it softened. "A cousin I will keep." They planned the farewell without calling it that. In the morning, they would walk through town, return the book to the vendor with the rings, or keep it and pay honestly, which is simply another form of return. They would stop by the grocer and ask for Sunday bread. They would tell Mr. Bell at the post office that a letter might be coming for Mary and that this time she intended to answer it promptly. After the market, Mary added, "We will come home and decide where in the living room Olivia will sit when she is ready to say sorry, and where I will sit when I am ready to say it better. And where I will sit," David said, "when I am ready to listen without rearranging what she says to suit the boy I used to be." "And where I will sit," Anna said, "to hand tissues and make jokes that embarrass everyone into surviving." They laughed, and it wasn't brave, it was ordinary, which is harder. Later, when sleep negotiated an armistice with their minds, Anna and David met at the top of the stairs, not by agreement, but by the logic of houses that herd their people toward honest places. They stood facing each other to lanterns in a narrow hall. "This is the part where we say goodbye," Anna said. "It's the part where we say see you and mean something different by it," David replied. She nodded. "Say it then?" "See you," he said. "See you," she answered. They didn't hug. They stood long enough to stitch the moment into something that would hold, then turned away, and the turning did not kill them, though it thought about it. Sunday would come with its awkward pastries and brilliant mercies. There would be a knock at the door that sounded like footsteps from 20 years ago. There would be tears that insulted mascara and sentences that rebuilt furniture. There would be a first photograph of 4 people who had been 3 shapes and 2 shadows only a week earlier. But tonight was for acceptance, which is simply grief after it has put on a clean shirt. Mary sat alone at the kitchen table a while longer. She opened the tin of letters and did not take one out. She closed the tin and placed her palm on the lid. "We will be brave," she told its metal. "We will do it awake." In the study, David lay on his back and let the ceiling be only a ceiling. Across the hall, Anna fell asleep with the herb bundle near her cheek and dreamed of a map with a new legend: ridge where wine returns, stick porch where music box remembers, kitchen where truth eats with us and always leaves a plate for later. The clock, relieved to resume its modest duties, counted the seconds with pastoral confidence. On the porch, the music box stuttered and then, charmingly, succeeded. The notes lifted and looped, imperfect and undeniable, as if the mechanism had learned something today about courage, not how to go without falter, but how to falter forward and call that a song.